You failed as a woman. He did not shout. He did not need to. The words were enough. Then came the water, cold and dirty, thrown without hesitation, as laughter and silence mixed in the same room. She stood still, soaked, realizing that humiliation does not always arrive with violence, but with permission. Permission granted by those who watch and choose not to stop it. This story begins at the moment dignity is stripped away in public, when a woman is judged not by who she is, but by what she is expected to produce. It speaks of power that mistakes cruelty for authority, and of systems that reward obedience while punishing restraint. What follows is not sudden. It is built slowly through endurance, through clarity, and through a truth kept hidden till it can no longer be ignored. Where are you listening from today? Share your city or country in the comments, and consider subscribing to continue this journey of reflection. The ballroom glowed with soft light, yet Sephora Vance felt as though she stood outside it, separated by an invisible wall. Conversations flowed around her, polite and distant, never quite reaching her ears. Guests smiled, nodded, then turned away. Tonight marked the Holloway family anniversary, a celebration of legacy and bloodline, and Sephora understood clearly where she stood in that order. She was the wife who had failed to produce an heir. She stood straight, her back calm, her chin lifted. The emerald gown she wore moved with quiet grace, chosen not to impress but to remind herself who she was. Sephora Vance was a senior diamond appraisal expert, a woman trained to judge value with precision. She had built her reputation long before she married Sterling Holloway. Yet here, surrounded by his family and their guests, her achievements dissolved into silence. Sterling appeared at the center of the room as if summoned by the attention itself. He was tall, confident, and loud, a man used to being obeyed. On his arm was Vivian Thorne, introduced tonight not as a guest, but as a promise. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, exaggerated in both movement and meaning. Whispers followed them like a shadow. Sterling raised his voice. "Everyone, please welcome the future of the Holloway family." The words landed hard. Sephora felt them before she heard them, a dull pressure in her chest. Vivian smiled, her eyes sharp as glass. She took a step forward, then another, and suddenly stumbled. The movement was small, almost theatrical, but the reaction was immediate. Sterling turned toward Sephora with fury already prepared. "What is wrong with you?" he shouted. "Can you not even stand still without causing harm?" Sephora did not move. She had been several steps away. She knew it. Everyone knew it. Still no one spoke. Vivian looked up from Sterling's arm, her lips trembling into a false vulnerability. "I am fine," she whispered. Then her gaze lifted toward Sephora, and the softness vanished. Sterling snapped his fingers. A servant hurried forward, confused, carrying a bucket meant for the staff. The smell reached Sephora before the sight did. It was dirty water, gray and heavy. A murmur passed through the guests. Some looked away, some watched closely. Vivian took the bucket from the servant's hands. Her smile returned, slow and deliberate. She stepped closer to Sephora, close enough for their eyes to meet. "You should know your place," Vivian said softly, for Sephora alone to hear. Then she lifted the bucket and threw the water forward. The cold struck first, then the weight. It soaked Sephora's hair, her face, her dress. The room froze. Water dripped onto the marble floor in an uneven rhythm. Sephora stood motionless as it ran down her skin, carrying with it the laughter she refused to hear. Sterling's voice cut through the silence. "A woman who cannot give birth is no better than barren land," he said. "You are useless. Vivian is carrying my child. She carries the future you could never give me." Sephora closed her eyes for a brief moment, not to escape, but to steady herself. Pain rose quickly, sharp and demanding, but she pressed it down, shaping it into something colder. When she opened her eyes again, her expression was calm. Slowly, she reached for the diamond necklace around her neck. It was a piece she had acquired herself years ago, valued in the millions, known among professionals for its clarity. She unclasped it carefully, wiped it clean with the edge of her sleeve, and held it in her palm. "My worth has never been defined by my womb," she said, her voice clear and even. "It has always been defined by my mind." The guest shifted. No one interrupted her. "You will remember this moment," Sephora continued, "not because you humiliated me, but because you will one day understand who you chose to disgrace." She turned. water still clinging to her dress, and walked out of the ballroom without haste. Each step echoed behind her, steady and unbroken. No one followed. Outside, the night air was cool against her skin. Sephora paused, her hands trembling at last. She allowed herself one breath, deep and controlled. Inside her, something had shifted. The pain had not disappeared, but it had changed form. This was no longer endurance. This was calculation. The living room of the Holloway estate felt colder than the night Sephora had just crossed. The silence inside was not calm. It was sharp, expectant, as if the walls themselves waited for judgment to be delivered. Sephora stood near the center of the room, her wet dress replaced by a simple robe offered by a maid who avoided her eyes. Her hair was still damp, pulled back with deliberate care. She refused to look disordered again. Sterling entered without greeting. He carried a thin folder in his hand, white and official, and threw it onto the table between them. The sound echoed louder than necessary. "There," he said. "The proof you always pretended did not exist." Sephora looked at the folder without touching it. She already knew what it contained. The fonts, the stamps. The careful arrangement meant to appear unquestionable. A medical report declaring her infertile from birth. She felt no surprise, only a brief tightening in her chest. "You have embarrassed me long enough," Sterling continued. "You will sign the divorce papers tonight. You will leave with nothing. That is generous, considering what you are." She lifted her eyes to him. His face was flushed with anger and relief mixed together. He believed himself victorious. "What am I?" she asked quietly. "A defective woman," he replied. "A burden, a mistake I tolerated for too long." Sephora opened the folder at last. She scanned the pages slowly, not because she needed to read them, but because she wanted him to watch her do it. Her thoughts remained clear. Weeks ago, she had sat in a private clinic, listening to a doctor explain that her body was healthy, strong, capable. She remembered the calm certainty in that voice. She also remembered the envelope she now carried in her own mind, containing Sterling's results. Permanent infertility, no chance of reversal. The truth pressed against her ribs, asking to be released. She did not let it out. "If you believe this," she said, closing the folder, "then you should protect the future you think you have." Sterling frowned. "Do not curse my child." "I did not," Sephora replied. "I only said you should be certain." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "You will regret this tone." He raised his hand and struck her across the face. The sound was dull, intimate, impossible to ignore. Sephora stumbled back but did not fall. Her cheek burned, her eyes filled, then steadied. She looked at him with something new. Not fear, not love. Calculation. "You are afraid," she said. "Not of me, but of the truth." Sterling laughed sharply. "The truth is written in that file." "No," Sephora answered. "The truth is written in time." His hand rose again, but this time he stopped himself. He turned away disgusted, as if she had already ceased to matter. "Sign the papers tomorrow," he said. "Until then, remember your place." He left the room without another glance. Sephora remained standing. Her face throbbed, but her mind moved faster. She pressed her palm against her cheek, grounding herself in the physical sensation. Pain was simple. Betrayal was not. In her memory, she opened another file, one Sterling had never seen. She saw the lab results, the doctor's careful language, the irreversible conclusion. Sterling Holloway would never father a child. The heir he celebrated was never his. Vivian's performance was not a miracle. It was a trap. Sephora lowered herself onto the sofa, her movements controlled. She did not cry. Tears belonged to moments when there was nothing left to do. She still had much to do. Her phone vibrated in her hand. A message from a private laboratory confirmed the last details she needed. She closed her eyes briefly, not in relief, but in acceptance. The path ahead was clear. Sterling believed she was finished. Vivian believed she had won. The Holloway family believed blood defined worth. They were wrong. Sephora rose and walked toward the window. Outside, the estate lights glowed steadily, unaware of the slow collapse beginning beneath them. She touched the glass lightly, her reflection staring back with calm resolve. "If you want a future built on lies," she whispered, "then you will live with the cost." Morning arrived without kindness. Sephora woke to a knock that did not wait for permission. A young housekeeper stood at the door, eyes lowered, hands folded tight. She spoke quickly as if afraid her voice might carry. "Madame Vivian has asked for this room," the girl said. Sir Sterling agreed. Sephora understood at once. She gathered her few personal items without argument. There was no negotiation left in this house. She followed the narrow corridor to a smaller room at the back of the estate, once reserved for staff during long stays. The bed was narrow, the window faced the service yard. The message was clear. Vivian Thorne moved into the main bedroom by noon. She appeared in the hallway surrounded by attendants, her hand resting on her belly, her smile gentle and victorious. She paused when she saw Sephora pass. "You should be grateful," Vivian said. "This is still a roof over your head." Sephora met her gaze. "Gratitude is earned," she replied calmly. Vivian's smile tightened. She turned away without another word. The rest of the day unfolded in small humiliations. Sephora was asked to pour tea she would not drink. She was instructed to stand while others sat. Sterling passed her in the corridor and did not acknowledge her presence. When he did speak, it was only to command. "Do not forget who carries my child," he said loudly at dinner, his arm around Vivian. "Some women exist only to serve." Madame Holloway, Sterling's mother, watched from the head of the table. She had always been distant, but now her distance sharpened into cruelty. She addressed Sephora as if speaking to an object. "A woman who cannot give a family is no better than labor," she said. "Work will teach you humility." Sephora listened in silence. Inside, her thoughts remained steady. Each word, each glance confirmed what she already knew. This household measured worth by blood and obedience. Neither defined her. That night, alone in the small room, Sephora opened her laptop. The familiar glow steadied her breathing. She logged into accounts she had once managed openly, contracts she had negotiated personally. Many of the Holloway partnerships bore her signature, her calculations, her risk assessments. She had brought value quietly, professionally, without applause. Now she worked differently. With careful precision, she reassigned obligations, redirected communications, and activated clauses that allowed transition under her authority. Each movement followed the law. Each decision was clean. She was not stealing. She was reclaiming what had always been tied to her expertise. Her phone vibrated with confirmation messages, one after another. The Holloway empire did not collapse, not yet, but its strength was thinning. In the days that followed, the pressure increased. Vivian issued instructions with false sweetness, correcting Sephora in front of staff. Sterling laughed when Sephora was forced to wait. Madame Holloway reminded her daily of her supposed failure. "You should learn from Vivian," she said one afternoon. "She understands her duty." Sephora nodded politely. She did not argue. Arguments belonged to those without plans. At night, she continued her work. She spoke quietly with legal advisors who recognized her voice immediately. She prepared documents that would be impossible to reverse. Each signature brought a sense of clarity. The pain remained, but it no longer controlled her. One evening, as she closed her computer, Sephora paused. She thought of her father, Bartholomew Vance, a man who had taught her independence before protection. He had never interfered in her marriage. He had trusted her strength. Soon she would call him. For now, she needed silence. She needed time. Sephora lay down and stared at the ceiling. The house above her slept in confidence, unaware that its foundations were shifting. She placed a hand over her heart, steady and deliberate. They believed they had reduced her to nothing. They had not realized they had given her freedom. Control arrived quietly, disguised as order. Vivian Thorne began issuing instructions as if she had always belonged at the center of the Holloway estate. Staff listened to her voice now. Budgets were discussed in her presence. Keys changed hands. Sephora observed the shift with careful attention. Vivian's authority did not come from knowledge. It came from Sterling's belief. That made it fragile. One afternoon, Sephora returned to her small room to find the door open. Drawers had been pulled out, boxes overturned, jewelry cases lay empty on the bed. Sterling stood near the window, his expression cold and resolved. Vivian sat nearby, her hands folded protectively over her belly. "Where is it?" Sterling demanded. Sephora remained still. "Where is what?" "The necklace," Vivian said gently. "The earrings. Several items are missing." Sephora understood immediately. This was not confusion. This was preparation. "I have taken nothing," she replied. Sterling stepped forward. "You expect us to believe that after everything you have done?" "What have I done?" Sephora asked. "You have humiliated this family," he said. "Now you steal from it." He reached into a box and threw its contents onto the floor. Pearls scattered across the carpet. A framed photograph shattered when it hit the wall. Sephora felt something tighten inside her, but she did not react outwardly. "Search everything," Sterling ordered. Two staff members hesitated, then obeyed. Sephora stood where she was, watching. She did not plead. She did not resist. Her phone rested in her palm, the camera recording silently from the angle of her sleeve. Vivian rose slowly and approached her. "You should confess," she said softly. "It will make this easier." Sephora met her eyes. "You will regret this performance." Vivian's lips curved into a thin smile. "You no longer have the power to threaten anyone." Sterling turned back toward Sephora. "Get out of this room," he said. "Everything here belongs to the Holloways." He gathered her belongings and threw them toward the door. Clothes, books, personal items landed without care. Sephora stepped back as the last box was pushed aside. "Leave," he repeated. She did not argue. She walked forward, her phone still recording, her expression calm. When she reached the doorway, she paused. "This is the last time you will touch me," she said quietly. Sterling laughed. "You are nothing." Sephora left the room. Down the corridor, she stopped and ended the recording. Her hands shook briefly, then steadied. She reviewed the footage, the shouting, the accusations, the destruction. The evidence was clear. She walked to the service stairwell and sat down. For the first time since the night of the party, her breathing faltered. Not from weakness, but from release. The moment had arrived. She dialed a number she had not used in years for help. The call connected immediately. "Father," she said. Bartholomew Vance's voice answered without hesitation. "Sephora." The sound of his voice broke something inside her. She closed her eyes. "The game is over," she said. "I need you to see what they have done. I want them to pay in the only language they respect." There was a pause, heavy with understanding. "Send me everything," he said. "Stay where you are." She sent the recording, the contracts, the confirmations she had prepared in silence. Bartholomew did not ask questions. He did not doubt her. He trusted her judgment. As the call ended, Sephora rose. Her path was no longer solitary. Behind her, the estate continued its routines. Vivian spoke confidently to staff. Sterling drank and congratulated himself. Madame Holloway planned celebrations. They did not hear the shift beneath their feet. Sephora returned to her small room and packed what remained. She did not cry. She did not look back. The humiliation had reached its limit. What followed would not be quiet. The celebration began before sunset. Lights were arranged across the front lawn, music carried from the open doors, and guests arrived with practiced smiles. Sephora watched from the edge of the corridor as laughter filled the house that no longer felt like one. This gathering was meant to honor a child who was not yet born, a future that had already been decided without her. She had been told to stay out of sight. A security supervisor named Malcolm, recently hired and eager to prove loyalty to Sterling, stood near the main entrance. He avoided her eyes but made his role clear. "You are not welcome tonight," he said quietly. "Orders from Sir Sterling." Sephora nodded once. She had expected this. From the terrace, Sir Sterling raised his glass. Vivian stood beside him, glowing with attention, her hand resting on her belly as if it were a crown. Madame Holloway moved among the guests with pride, introducing Vivian as family. No one spoke Sephora's name. Then Sterling turned and saw her. The smile fell from his face. He crossed the distance quickly, his irritation sharpened by alcohol and applause. "Why are you still here?" he demanded. Sephora did not answer immediately. She looked at the guests behind him, the people who had once nodded politely to her presence. Their eyes followed the exchange with curiosity, not concern. "I live here," she said at last. Sterling laughed. "Not anymore." He gestured sharply. Two guards approached. One of them reached for Sephora's arm. She stepped back before contact was made. "Do not touch me," she said calmly. Sterling leaned closer. "Take her out." The guards hesitated, then obeyed. Sephora allowed herself to be escorted through the entrance hall, past the guests who fell silent as she passed. No one intervened. No one asked why. Outside, rain began to fall, steady and cold. The gates stood open. A single suitcase had been placed near the steps, its contents visible through a broken zipper. Vivian followed them out, holding a glass of red wine. She stopped in front of Sephora, smiling with satisfaction. "Leave," Vivian said. "This world has no place for women who cannot give anything." She tipped the glass, letting the wine spill over the suitcase. The liquid soaked into the fabric, staining it dark. Sterling stepped forward. "You were a mistake," he said. "A mark I regret. Go back to wherever you came from." Rain streaked down Sephora's face. She did not wipe it away. She looked at Sterling, truly looked at him, and saw not power but fear. Fear of exposure. Fear of insignificance. You believe this is victory, she said. It is only the beginning. Sterling sneered. You have nothing. Sephora bent and picked up the suitcase. It was heavier than it should have been, weighed down by years she would not reclaim. She straightened, rain clinging to her hair and clothes, her posture unbroken. She turned once more toward the house. Music had resumed inside. Laughter rose again, careless and loud. I pity you, she said quietly, because you will never know who you pushed away. No one answered. Sephora walked beyond the gates and stopped under the rain. She did not cry. Her hands tightened around the handle of the suitcase, then relaxed. The humiliation was complete. There was nothing left for them to take. She took out her phone and looked at the message waiting on the screen. A single line from her father. I am on my way. For the first time that night, Sephora allowed herself to breathe freely. She stood alone in the rain, not abandoned, but released. What had been taken from her would return with interest. Behind her, the Holloway estate glowed brightly. It would not shine for long. The rain had softened to a mist when the sound of sirens cut through the night. Sephora lifted her head slowly. Headlights appeared beyond the gates, one after another, sharp and deliberate. The guards turned in confusion as a line of armored vehicles stopped in perfect formation. The music inside the estate faltered. Sterling stepped onto the terrace, irritation already forming on his face. What is this? He demanded. The first car door opened. A man stepped out with controlled authority, his posture straight, his presence unmistakable. Bartholomew Vance did not rush. He did not raise his voice. His power moved with restraint. Sephora felt her chest tighten. She had not seen her father in years, not because of distance, but because he had trusted her independence. Now he was here. He crossed the rain-soaked ground and stopped in front of her. Without hesitation, he placed his coat around her shoulders. The gesture was simple, protective, final. Are you hurt, Himasum? He asked. No, Sephora answered. Not anymore. Behind him, a senior police inspector approached. A man named Laurent Moreau, known for handling financial crimes involving high-profile families. He nodded respectfully toward Bartholomew, then turned his attention to Sterling. Sir, Laurent said, we have received multiple reports requiring immediate clarification. Sterling laughed nervously. This is a private matter. Bartholomew turned at last. His gaze settled on Sterling with calm intensity. You made it public when you chose humiliation, he said. He handed Sterling a folder. The papers slid free and scattered slightly in the damp air. The child you celebrate, Bartholomew continued, his voice steady, is not yours. The medical tests are verified. The biological father is your former driver. Vivian froze. Her glass slipped from her hand and shattered at her feet. Sterling shook his head. That is impossible. Bartholomew placed another document into Sterling's hands. This one confirms your condition. Permanent infertility. My daughter protected your reputation. You repaid her with cruelty. The silence was complete. Guests had gathered at the edge of the terrace, drawn by the sudden shift. No one spoke. Bartholomew took a step forward. As of this evening, I have acquired the entirety of Holloway Holdings' debt. Your estate, your assets, your name, all now fall under my authority. Sterling staggered back. You cannot do this. I already have, Bartholomew replied. Laurent raised his hand. Officers moved forward. Vivian began to cry, her composure collapsing as quickly as it had formed. This is a mistake, she pleaded. It is an investigation, Laurent corrected. Fraud and misrepresentation. As they escorted Vivian away, Sephora watched without satisfaction, only clarity. The truth had not saved her. It had freed her. Sterling stood alone, his confidence dissolved. He looked at Sephora, searching for mercy. You knew, he whispered. Yes, she said simply. Bartholomew turned to the guards at the gate. You are dismissed. One by one, they stepped aside. Sephora walked forward. The rain had stopped completely now. She looked at the house behind Sterling, at the lights that no longer impressed her. This place was never home, she said. Bartholomew placed a hand on her back. You are safe now. Sephora nodded. She was more than safe. She was restored. Behind them, the Holloway legacy collapsed without noise. The collapse did not arrive with noise. It came with silence and paperwork and doors that no longer opened. Sterling Holloway learned this slowly, through unanswered calls and accounts frozen without warning. The house that had once echoed with confidence stood empty, its rooms stripped of meaning. He wandered through it like a guest who had overstayed his welcome. Vivian Thorne disappeared from society within days. The press did not use her name at first, only phrases like financial deception and false representation. When she was finally seen again, it was in a courthouse hallway, her face pale, her posture broken. The child she had claimed as leverage became evidence instead. She avoided Sephora's name, as if speaking it would seal her fate. Sephora followed these events from a distance. She did not watch the footage. She did not read the articles. Revenge had never been her goal. Resolution was. Weeks later, she stood in a quiet office overlooking the city. The name on the building was Vance, restored to its rightful place. Bartholomew Vance sat across from her, his expression softened by pride and regret. "I should have come sooner," he said. "You trusted me," Sephora replied. "That mattered." He nodded. "You have always known who you are." She signed the final document without hesitation. With that signature, she became the sole heir to the Vance holdings, not as a reward, but as recognition. Her father watched her closely, seeing not the child he once protected, but the woman she had become. "I want to build something," Sephora said. "Not an empire, a place." Bartholomew smiled. "Then you will." The center opened months later. It was not announced with grandeur. Women arrived quietly, carrying stories heavier than their bags. Some had suffered abuse. Some had been told their bodies defined their worth. Sephora greeted each of them with the same calm attention she once reserved for diamonds. "Your value is not conditional," she told them. "It never was." They listened. On the night of the International Diamond Exhibition, the hall shimmered with light. The collection bore Sephora's name, not as branding, but as authorship. Each piece reflected precision and restraint, strength without excess. As she stepped onto the stage, applause rose naturally. Sephora did not bow. She met the audience with steady eyes. Bartholomew stood at the back, his gaze fixed on his daughter. He did not need to speak. Everything he had wanted to say lived in her presence. After the event, as the hall emptied, Sephora paused alone beneath the lights. She thought of the woman who had stood in the rain with a suitcase, stripped of dignity but not of self. She felt no bitterness toward that memory. Only distance. Her phone vibrated once. A message from an unknown number appeared, then vanished before she could read it. She did not try to retrieve it. The past no longer demanded her attention. Sephora turned toward the exit, her steps unhurried. Freedom did not feel dramatic. It felt quiet, earned. Outside, the city moved forward without pause. She joined it, not as a survivor, but as a woman who knew her worth. The world did not bow to her. It adjusted. As this journey comes to an end, what remains is not the noise of confrontation, but the quiet echo of recognition. Stories like this do not exist to accuse or to glorify. They exist because certain human and social mechanisms repeat themselves in many lives, often in silence. Power can blind. Fear can disguise itself as authority. And dignity is too often measured by standards that were never fair to begin with. Some may recognize fragments of their own experiences here. Others may simply sense how easily worth can be denied and how difficult it is to reclaim. Yet within that struggle lies a truth that feels deeply human. When a person understands their own value, no humiliation can fully erase it. Thank you for taking the time to listen and reflect. If this story stirred a thought, a memory, or a question, feel free to share your perspective. Every viewpoint adds meaning. Until next time, take care and keep listening to the stories that ask us to look a little closer.